The meeting invite hit my calendar at 3:47 on a Friday afternoon. Subject performance development discussion with Bethany Keller. Optional location conference room the kind of beige corporate purgatory where dreams go to die. Bethany was my new manager, 6 weeks on the job, fresh from some consulting firm that probably charged clients $1,000 to tell them to pivot their synergies or some other meaningless garbage. She had that crisp MBA confidence, the kind that comes from never actually doing the work, just critiquing other people's methods from a safe distance. I walked into that conference room knowing exactly what this was. They don't schedule performance development discussions on Friday afternoons unless they're planning to ruin your weekend. Bethany sat there with her color-coded planner open to a page that looked like a kindergarten teacher's behavior chart. My name at the top, followed by bullet points that made my stomach clench. Unauthorized project scope expansion, working outside, established protocols, failure to seek approval for client communications. I stared at the paper, wondering if she was describing me or some rogue employee who'd been stealing office supplies and setting fires in the break room. "Thanks for joining me," Bethany said with that synthetic warmth our consultants learn in overpriced seminars. "I want to discuss some concerns about your recent work patterns. I've been tracking several instances where your approach doesn't align with our departmental standards." Tracking? I blinked like she was running surveillance on my bathroom breaks. Bethany nodded, pulling out another folder. This one thicker, more official looking, for example. "Last month you reached out directly to Hoffman Industries about their logistics concerns, without routing the request through proper channels that violated our client relationship management protocol. Hoffman Industries?" I repeated slowly the account where I personally saved us a $250,000 contract by catching a billing error. Their own accounting department missed the one where the client specifically requested to work with me, directly moving forward because, and I quote, "your attention to detail saved our partnership." Bethany's smile tightened. "That's exactly the issue you're creating. Dependencies that circumvent team structure. It's not sustainable." I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. "Not sustainable meaning what exactly?" "Meaning," she said, leaning forward like a guidance counselor about to explain why I couldn't take advanced math. "We need to establish clearer boundaries for your role. Moving forward, I'm implementing a performance improvement plan effective Monday." She slid the folder across the table like she was dealing cards at a poker game. Where the house always wins inside was a document that looked like it had been written by someone who learned management from watching YouTube videos. Measurable goals included: seek supervisor approval before client. Contact complete all tasks within designated project parameters, attend weekly check-ins for performance monitoring the timeline, 60 days to demonstrate improved adherence to departmental protocols or face further corrective action. I looked up from the paper, and Bethany was watching me like a scientist observing a lab rat in a maze. "Do you have any questions about the expectations?" she asked. I had questions plenty, starting with who the hell did she think she was, and ending with whether she'd ever actually read my performance reviews from the past 3 years. But I didn't ask those. Instead, I said, "When do the weekly check-ins start?" "Monday," she replied. 9 a.m. sharp. I suggest you prepare a summary of all current projects with proposed timelines for completion." I walked out of that conference room feeling like I'd been slapped with a wet fish. My entire approach to work, everything that had made me successful for 3 years, was suddenly being reframed as insubordination by someone who probably couldn't find the coffee machine without GPS. But here's the thing about performance improvement plans. They're supposed to be corrective tools designed to help struggling employees get back on track. What they actually are, in most cases, is a paper trail, a legal safety net, that lets companies fire people without having to admit they're firing people. And Bethany, she thought she was building a case against me. What she was actually doing was handing me a roadmap to destroy her career piece by piece. If you've ever been micromanaged by someone half as competent as you, this story is going to hit different. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this plays out. Because trust me, it gets so much better. Monday morning came like a hangover wrapped in false optimism. I showed up to Bethany's office at exactly 9, carrying a folder thick enough to choke a horse inside was every project I'd worked on in the past 6 months, complete with timelines, client feedback, budget, impact, and success metrics. I'd spent the weekend turning my work into a legal document because if Bethany wanted to play bureaucracy, I was going to show her what professional documentation actually looked like. She gestured to the chair across from her desk, which was decorated with motivational posters that looked like they came from the clearance section of a business school bookstore. One of them actually said "Teamwork makes the dream work" in cursive font over a picture of rowing crew. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. "Walk me through your current project load," she said. Pulling out a legal pad like she was about to take dictation, I opened my folder and began the Hoffman Industries account. I said, "Is in final approval phase." Pending signature on the revised contract terms, I negotiated a 7% cost reduction while expanding their service package. The estimated annual value is $420,000. She scribbled something down next, the Meridian Tech integration. I oversee 3 subcontractors and coordinate with their internal IT team. We're ahead of schedule and under budget by 12%. Client satisfaction ratings from their last quarterly review were 9.4 out of 10. Bethany looked up from her notes. "You said you coordinate with their IT team directly. That's client contact without supervisory approval." I paused. "Yes, because their technical requirements change daily and routing every decision through. You would create delays that could cost us the contract." She frowned. "That's not the point. The point is protocol exists for a reason. I could feel my patience wearing thin like a rope holding too much weight. The reason, I said carefully, is to ensure client satisfaction and project success, both of which I've consistently delivered for 3 years. Bethany set down her pen and gave me that condescending smile that probably worked on her MBA classmates. "We're not questioning your results. We're addressing your methods. And methods matter just as much as outcomes." That was the moment I realized Bethany wasn't trying to improve my performance. She was trying to control it. There's a difference between management and micromanagement, and Bethany had crossed that line so far behind her she couldn't see it with binoculars. She wanted me to fail not because I was failing, but because my success was happening outside her direct oversight, and that made her look unnecessary, which frankly she was over the next 2 weeks. Bethany turned my work life into a bureaucratic nightmare. Every client email had to be pre-approved. Every project decision required a consultation. Every creative solution needed committee approval. She scheduled check-ins twice a week, then 3 times, then daily 15-minute stand-ups, where she'd ask me to justify decisions I'd already justified in the previous meeting. I started documenting everything, not just my work, but hers. Every request, every approval delay, every time she contradicted herself or asked me to redo something I'd already done correctly. I kept meticulous records of client feedback, project timelines, and cost savings because I had a suspicion that Bethany's performance improvement plan was about to become her performance improvement a problem. Then came the client meeting that changed everything. Hoffman Industries had scheduled their quarterly review and Bethany insisted on attending. This was my account, my relationship, my work. But suddenly, she needed to be there to ensure proper client relationship management. She spent the entire meeting nodding and smiling while contributing nothing of substance. When David Hoffman, the CEO, asked about the new efficiency protocols I'd implemented, Bethany jumped in with generic consulting speak about optimization and synergistic workflow enhancement. David listened politely, then turned back to me and said, "Can you explain what that actually means in terms?" We can understand. That's when I realized Bethany didn't understand the work she was managing. She knew the buzzwords, the corporate terminology, the management frameworks, but she had no idea how any of it translated into actual value for our clients. After the meeting, David pulled me aside and said something that made my entire strategy crystallize in my mind. "Whatever changes you've made in the past 6 months, keep doing them. Your attention to detail and direct communication style has saved us more money and headaches than the previous 3 account managers combined. If Bethany ever leaves, can we request to keep working with you specifically?" I smiled and said, "I'll make sure that feedback gets documented." David nodded. "Good, because we're considering expanding our contract and we want to make sure we're working with people who actually understand our business." That night, I went home and opened a new document on my laptop. I titled it Performance Metrics, Comparative Analysis, and started building what would become Bethany's professional obituary. I pulled together every measurable outcome from the past 6 months: client satisfaction ratings project, completion times cost, savings, client retention rates, error frequency, response times. The numbers told a story, and it wasn't the story Bethany had been telling in her weekly reports while she'd been focused on managing my methods. I'd been delivering results that spoke for themselves. Hoffman Industries, 7% cost reduction ahead of schedule, 94% satisfaction rating. Meridian Tech, 12% under budget 0. Change orders client specifically requested, continued partnership. Davidson Logistics caught billing error. Saving client $250,000, received commendation letter from client CEO. Whitfield Solutions early delivery resulted in bonus payment and contract extension. Client recommended our services to 2 additional companies. The pattern was clear. Bethany could critique my methods all she wanted, but she couldn't argue with outcomes. And more importantly, I had documentation to prove that her management style was actually hindering performance, not improving it. Then I started tracking her contributions to these successes. The result was a spreadsheet that looked like a medical examiner's report: cause of success, project management interference, 0 client relationship building, 0 technical problem solving, 0 strategic planning, 0 value added, negative 12% due to approval delays. I had the ammunition. Now I just needed the right target practice. I called Hoffman Industries and scheduled a client satisfaction survey. Not unusual. We did them quarterly, but this time I made sure to ask specific questions about management responsiveness, communication, efficiency, and decision-making speed. I sent similar surveys to our other major clients. The responses were illuminating. David Hoffman wrote, "The current account management approach is significantly more responsive than previous years. Direct communication has eliminated delays that previously cost us time and money. We appreciate working with team members who understand our business and can make decisions quickly." Meridian Tech responded, "The streamlined approach this year has been excellent. Fewer meetings, more results. We hope this efficiency continues." Davidson Logistics noted, "Substantial improvement in problem resolution, time, and accuracy would recommend current methodologies be maintained as best practice." Whitfield Solutions specifically mentioned, "Appreciation for proactive communication and strategic thinking that prevents problems rather than just solving them." I compiled all of this feedback into a comprehensive report that painted a very clear picture. Bethany's micromanagement wasn't just unnecessary, it was actively working against client satisfaction and business objectives. But I wasn't ready to fire that weapon yet. I needed one more piece of evidence, and Bethany was about to hand it to me on a silver platter. The opportunity came during our next weekly check-in. Bethany had prepared what she called a midpoint evaluation of my performance. Improvement plan. She sat across from her desk with another folder, this one labeled with my name in her careful handwriting. "I've been reviewing your progress," she began, "and while I see some improvement in documentation, there are still concerns about your independent decision-making. Last week, you approved a timeline change for the Meridian project. Without consulting me first, I nodded. That's correct. The client requested an acceleration of the delivery schedule by 2 weeks. I assessed our capacity, determined it was feasible, and confirmed the change, saving the client from potential cost overruns if they'd missed their internal deadline." Bethany frowned. "But you didn't seek approval. That's still a deviation from the established protocol." "The established protocol," I said slowly, "would have required scheduling a meeting, getting your sign-off, then communicating back to the client. A process that would have taken at minimum 48 hours, during which the client's internal deadline would have passed, and they would have incurred significant financial penalties." Bethany's jaw tightened. "That's not the point. The point is, you're not following the process." I leaned forward. "Then let me ask you something, Bethany. When you approve or deny my decisions, what criteria do you use?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what's your decision-making framework?" "When I request approval for a client, timeline change, what factors do you consider? How do you evaluate whether the decision is sound?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "I evaluate whether it aligns with our departmental standards and project management best practices." "That's not an answer," I said gently. "That's corporate speak. Can you tell me specifically what factors you consider?" "Client, impact, budget implications, resource, allocation, technical feasibility, risk, assessment." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Neither of us wanted to walk across. Bethany's face went through several expressions: confusion, irritation, then something that looked uncomfortably like panic. She didn't know she was managing process. She didn't understand. Approving decisions based on criteria she couldn't articulate, critiquing methods she'd never actually used herself. "I'll need to get back to you on that," she said finally, her voice smaller than before. "Of course," I said, standing. "I'll send you my decision-making framework via email so you can review my thought process for future approvals." I walked out of that meeting knowing I'd just won the war. Bethany didn't realize it yet, but she'd just admitted she didn't know how to do the job she was hired to manage. That night, I drafted an email that would become the beginning of the end for Bethany's career at our company, but I didn't send it yet. I needed one more domino to fall, and it was already teetering. The next morning, Bethany sent me an email that read like a desperate attempt to reassert authority. Subject: immediate action required. She wrote, "I need you to redo the Hoffman Industries quarterly analysis. The format doesn't match our standard template. Please resubmit by end of day." The Hoffman analysis was a 37-page document that had taken me 6 hours to complete. It included detailed performance metrics, client feedback, comparative analysis, and strategic recommendations for the upcoming quarter. It was comprehensive, professional, and had received glowing feedback from the client when I'd sent it for their review. But apparently it didn't match Bethany's template. I printed out the email and walked to her office. She was sitting behind her desk looking like someone who'd just realized she'd bet her house on a horse that was running backwards. "Can you clarify what specifically needs to be changed?" I asked, holding up the printed email. She gestured vaguely at her computer screen. "The formatting, the structure it needs to follow, our departmental template." I pulled out my copy of the analysis and set it on her desk. "Can you show me which sections don't align with the template?" She stared at the document for a long moment, then pointed to a random page. "This section here, it's not in the right order." I looked at the page she was pointing to. It was the executive summary positioned exactly where every executive summary should be. At the beginning. "What order should it be in?" I asked. Bethany's face flushed. Just follow the template, please." That's when I knew she'd never actually read the analysis she was asking me to redo 6 hours of work because she needed to feel like she was managing anything, even if that something was a perfectly good document that she couldn't improve if her life depended on it. I went back to my desk and opened a new email addressed to David Hoffman, our client contact. I wrote David as promised. "Here's the quarterly analysis we discussed. Let me know if you need any clarification on the recommendations or if you'd like to schedule a follow-up call to discuss implementation. Best regards." David responded within an hour. "Excellent work. As always, the strategic recommendations in Section 4 could save us significant cost. If implemented. This quarter, can we schedule a call tomorrow to discuss timeline? This is exactly the kind of proactive analysis that makes our partnership so valuable." Then I forwarded David's response to Bethany with a note. "The client has approved the analysis format and would like to discuss implementation tomorrow. Please confirm if you'd like to join the call." Silence. Radio. Silence for the rest of the day. No response to my email. No acknowledgement of the client feedback. No communication at all. Bethany had painted herself into a corner she'd criticized work. The client had praised, demanded changes to something that was already successful, and now she had to figure out how to save face without admitting she'd been wrong. That's when I decided it was time to light the fuse. The email I sent wasn't to Bethany. It was to her boss, Richard Stone, the director of client services. Richard had hired me 3 years ago, back when the department was smaller and every person's contribution mattered. He'd watched me build relationships, manage complex projects, and deliver results that directly impacted the company's bottom line. More importantly, Richard understood the work because he'd done it himself before getting promoted to management subject. "Client feedback and performance metrics," I wrote Richard. I wanted to share some recent client feedback and performance data that might be relevant for our upcoming quarterly reviews. Attached are client satisfaction surveys from our 4 major accounts, along with comparative performance metrics for the past 6 months. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, with specific mentions of improved responsiveness and strategic thinking. However, I wanted to flag a potential concern. Several clients have noted that approval delays in our current process are beginning to impact project timelines. I believe this is worth discussing as we evaluate our departmental effectiveness moving forward. I'd be happy to schedule a meeting to review these findings in detail. Please let me know your availability. Then I attached everything: the client surveys, the performance metrics, the comparative analysis, Bethany's approval delays documented with timestamps and impact assessments. It was a data-driven case study in management failure. Wrapped in the polite language of professional concern, I sent the email at 4:30 on a Friday. Richard was the kind of director who actually read his email over the weekend. By Monday morning, I had a response schedule, a meeting for Wednesday 3 p.m., bring all supporting documentation. I forwarded the meeting invitation to Bethany with a note. Richard would like to review the client feedback and performance metrics we discussed. Please plan to attend Wednesday. Couldn't come fast enough. I arrived at Richard's office 5 minutes early. Bethany was already there, sitting in the chair across from his desk, looking like someone who'd just been told the audit was starting early. Richard gestured for me to sit, then opened his laptop to a document. I recognized my email with all the attachments spread across his screen. "I've reviewed the materials you sent," he said. His voice neutral, but his eyes sharp. "The client feedback is impressive, particularly the specific mentions of responsiveness and strategic value." He turned to Bethany. "Can you walk me through your assessment of these performance metrics?" Bethany shifted in her chair. "Well, the results are certainly positive, but I have concerns about process adherence and protocol compliance." Richard's eyebrows raised. "Process adherence. Can you be more specific?" She pulled out a folder I'd seen before, the same performance improvement plan she'd been waving around for weeks. There have been instances of unauthorized client contact, independent decision-making without supervisory approval, deviation from established departmental procedures. Richard listened, then turned back to his laptop, pulling up one of the client surveys. David Hoffman specifically mentions that direct communication eliminated delays that were costing his company time and money. He looked at Bethany. "How do we reconcile that feedback with concerns about unauthorized client contact?" Bethany's face went pale. "Well, the feedback is positive, but the methods aren't sustainable. They create dependencies that circumvent team structure." Richard nodded slowly, then opened another document. "The Meridian Tech Client Survey mentions appreciation for streamlined process and fewer meetings with better results." He looked directly at Bethany. "How does that align with your assessment?" "That more supervisory oversight is needed." Silence. The kind of silence that fills a room like water flooding a sinking ship. Bethany realized she was drowning and there was no lifeline coming. "Let me ask a different question." Richard continued, turning to me. "Can you walk me through your decision-making process for the timeline change on the Meridian project?" I pulled out my notes, assessed client request against available resources, evaluated risk factors, calculated cost-benefit analysis, determined feasibility, confirmed change with client, documented decision and reasoning. Tracked implementation results. Richard nodded to Bethany, and when this decision was made, "Where were you in the process?" Bethany's voice came out as barely a whisper. I wasn't consulted because I didn't have the technical background to evaluate the feasibility." Richard leaned back in his chair, looking like a judge who just heard a confession that made the verdict obvious. "So we have client feedback, praising direct communication and streamlined processes, performance metrics showing improved efficiency and cost savings, and a documented decision-making framework that prioritizes client needs and business outcomes." He paused, looking between us. "Help me understand what problem we're trying to solve here." That was the moment Bethany's career at our company ended. She might not have known it yet, but Richard did, and so did I. She'd built her case against me, using the very evidence that proved she was unnecessary. Worse than unnecessary, she was an obstacle to the client satisfaction and business results that actually mattered. Richard closed his laptop. "I think we need to reevaluate our current management structure and process requirements. I'll be conducting individual performance reviews over the next week. I want to understand how we can optimize our departmental effectiveness moving forward." Bethany nodded, like someone agreeing to their own execution. "I'll schedule time with both of you separately," he continued. "In the meantime, I want current project management to continue without disruption. The client relationships and performance metrics clearly indicate our current approach is working." Walking out of that meeting felt like emerging from an underground bunker after an air raid. Sirens were still going off, but the immediate danger had passed. Bethany walked beside me down the hallway, but we didn't speak. What was there to say? She'd tried to performance manage me out of effectiveness, and instead had performance managed herself out of relevance. The next week, Richard conducted his individual reviews. Mine lasted 45 minutes. We talked about client relationships, strategic thinking, project management, methodology, and career development plans. He asked about my goals, my assessment of departmental needs, and my recommendations for process improvements. It felt like a conversation between two professionals discussing how to build something better. Bethany's review lasted 12 minutes, I know, because I was scheduled directly after her and she was walking out of Richard's office as I was walking in. She didn't make eye contact 2 days later. Richard sent out an organizational announcement. Effective immediately, Bethany would be transitioning to a project coordinator role focused on administrative support and process documentation. Her direct reports would now report to Richard during the restructuring phase, which was corporate speak for Bethany had been demoted to filing and I was being promoted to acting manager. The email continued, given recent client feedback and performance metrics. We're implementing a more streamlined approach to client relationship management. Team members with direct client relationships will have increased autonomy for routine decisions with appropriate documentation and quarterly reviews, translation. Everything Bethany had called insubordination was now official company policy. A month later, Richard called me into his office again, this time with an offer letter. Senior Client Relationship Manager, 15% salary, increase, equity, participation, and my own small team to manage the role description read like a wish list responsible for strategic client relationships, project leadership and team development, work directly with clients to ensure satisfaction and business outcomes, implement best practices for communication and decision making, mentor junior team members in client relationship management. It was everything Bethany had tried to prevent me from doing. Turned into my official job description, I signed the letter and shook Richard's hand. He smiled. "You know," he said, "the client feedback from Hoffman Industries specifically requested that you be their primary contact moving forward. They want to expand their contract, but only if they can keep working with you." Apparently, they were impressed with someone who could make decisions and get things done. I thought about Bethany in her new role, organizing filing systems and updating process documentation. No client contact, no decision-making authority, no strategic input, just the administrative tasks she'd tried to reduce me to. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. But that's the thing about trying to diminish someone competent. You don't make them smaller. You just reveal how unnecessary your oversight really was, and sometimes the people watching take notes. 6 months later, I heard through the office grapevine that Bethany had found a new position at a different company project. Coordinator, role. Same level she'd been demoted to at ours. Apparently, she'd learned to appreciate process documentation and administrative support, which was probably for the best. Management requires understanding the work you're managing, and Bethany never quite grasped that concept. My team grew to 5 people, all of them client-facing, all of them empowered to make decisions within their expertise, all of them delivering results that spoke for themselves. Because here's what Bethany never understood. Performance management isn't about controlling people. It's about enabling them to perform. And when you try to manage someone more capable than you are, you're not improving performance. You're just highlighting your own limitations. The best revenge isn't proving someone wrong, it's proving them irrelevant. And sometimes the sweetest part is they do most of the work themselves. You just have to document it properly. Hit that subscribe button. If you've ever had a manager who confused control with competence, because trust me, this story is just the beginning of what happens when micromanagers meet their match.